A woman is murdered, a man is convicted, but did they get the right killer? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Alene Lulu Courchesne. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you're new to the channel, I tell 3 true crime stories. Stop being exotic. Exotic? No. A week here on YouTube. I tell a story on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok, where I'm definitely more known. I have about 3 million followers over there or so. So feel free to follow me there. The link will pop up here at some point in the beginning and also towards the end of the video. It also is in the link tree in the description of this video below. The link tree will also have my merch store. I sell some like shirts and hoodies and stuff, and we ship all over the entirety of the planet of Earth, of the universe, the galaxy, of the Guardians. Shut up, Mike. You got it. And then if there's a case you want me to cover, please just email me. My email is listed below as well. Just email me the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened, and then I will add it to the list. I do have 5,500 plus names on that list as of right now, so it may be a very long time before I get to that one, but I will eventually. I pick my cases at random to cover just to be fair. But at any rate, let's get into today's story. I always do something with my hands, and I don't know why. Stop it. You got it. Again. Okay. Bye. No. Hello. It was October 18th, 1987, just outside of Rochester, New Hampshire. I guess just off the Spalding Turnpike, there is this dumping area or this field type area, and a body was discovered. It was the body of a female. She had been beaten and she had been strangled to death. Not too soon after she was found, she was identified as a 34-year-old divorced mother to 3 children. Her name was Alene Courchesne. She would go by Lulu, though, to everyone. Alene was currently engaged to a man named Darren Healy, a man who is actually currently, at the time of this case, he was in jail. After roughly 6 months or so of investigating, police would arrest a man named Rick McHugh, a 24-year-old man who apparently had just recently met Lulu, and he was charged with her murder. Lulu worked at a local convenience store, and I guess she worked kind of like the later shifts. On October 16th, 1987, Rick would walk into that convenience store, and that is how he met Lulu. And this was only a couple of days before she was found murdered. Lulu was wearing an engagement ring because she was engaged to Darren Healy. But Rick apparently was super confident, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to ask her out anyway. And so he did. He asked Lulu out on a date. And she accepted. They went out for drinks. And then after that particular night, they would arrange to meet again the following night on October 17th. So on the night of October 17th, Lulu was in her apartment getting ready, and Rick McHugh showed up to pick her up in his truck. While she was getting ready, she let him kind of come into the apartment and just, wait there. While he was in the apartment, another man just walks in. His name is Russell Healy. He is the brother of Lulu's fiance, Darren. Rick wouldn't learn until, I guess, a little bit later in the evening or some point very soon afterwards that Lulu was engaged to this guy's brother. Just by coincidence, as everyone's there in the apartment, Darren calls the apartment from jail, and Russell picks up the phone. He gives the phone to Lulu when she's out of the shower, and she does this signal to basically to the 2 men to indicate, especially for Rick, to not say anything because they don't want Darren to hear his voice. So she talks to Darren for a minute, and then she gives the phone back to Russell, and then Russell even says, it's just me and Lulu here and nobody else. So he lies that about Rick, he doesn't say he's there. So Lulu and Rick, they leave the apartment in Rick's truck, and they drive to a bar. They hang out there for a little bit. They go to another bar, hang out, have some drinks. They shoot some pool. Both of them are relatively intoxicated. I think they said Lulu was a little more drunk than Rick was. Rick was still able to drive fine. Don't drink and drive, kids. All right? This is supposed to be serious. I know it sounds like it's not, but it's serious. So when the night's kind of over with, they get back into Rick's truck, and according to Rick, the two of them share a kiss. Pretty intimate kiss. And then Rick ends up driving them back to Rick's apartment. And Rick has roommates. And his roommates are Cheryl and Marty McGuire. Both witnesses would state that there was no audible sounds of violence or screaming or anything to indicate anything was wrong or that anyone was in trouble. It sounded to them like Lulu and Rick were probably having sex, that they were being intimate with one another. At one point, Cheryl says she heard the woman's voice say, "Hey, slow down." Not in a panicky way or not in a scared way, just a, "Hey, just, slow down kind of way. And then a little bit later, I guess Cheryl hears Rick saying, "Okay, so go ahead and get dressed and I will take you home." It sounded very friendly, very normal. It did not, again, sound like any kind of distress was going on. Cheryl is essentially, she recounts this as happening sometime around 2:30 in the morning. And I think that is when she hears the two of them leaving the apartment, is around 2:30. Cheryl then waits a little bit of time, and then she goes out to the kitchen, and then she picks up the phone to call this all-night donut shop that is where she works. And later on, phone records would determine she made that phone call at 2:42 a.m. And then Rick was home fairly quickly after that, within, I think, 15 minutes. The drive between his apartment and Lulu's apartment was about a 4-minute drive. Now, back at Lulu's apartment complex, a woman named Lori Clark, who was a neighbor to Lulu, said she saw Rick pull up in his truck to bring Lulu home. And this was literally feet in front of this woman's window. And so she could clearly see Lulu and Rick. And she actually says, I see Lulu getting out of the truck and walking towards her apartment by herself. But in the interim, she also hears a loud conversation between Lulu and Rick. And the reason why it's a loud conversation, it sounds like screaming, is because Rick's truck had a very loud muffler. And so they were just talking over that. Rick had called Lulu back real quick because she'd forgotten some belongings in the truck. And so he handed it to her. And then Lulu goes into her apartment. And then Rick pulls away and he leaves. The neighbor actually hears and sees Lulu kind of stumbling towards the stairs because she was a little intoxicated still. And that was it. And she heard no argument. She heard no sounds of a struggle or a fight or screaming or anything. It was all quiet after that. 14 hours later, the woman's body is found near the Spalding Turnpike, confirmed to be the body of Lulu. The medical examiner, based on the autopsy, determined that Lulu was killed at some point between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Based on the alcohol content in her stomach and her stomach contents in general, the coroner said it was more than likely closer to that 2 a.m. time frame when she was killed. But that wouldn't really make a lot of sense because Lulu was observed alive and well closer to 3 a.m. Lulu had a gash over her right eye. It was a fresh gash. And then, of course, they determined that she had been strangled and she had some other indications that she was beat. Now, where her body was found, they also found tire impressions. The tire impressions, by the way, I'm showing, they're just basically stock photos. I couldn't find any crime scene photos for this case. But they found tire impressions all the same by where her body was, and these were fresh tire tracks. So the day after she's found, the police are informed about Rick and this, meeting a date that he had with Lulu, how he was likely the last person to see her alive. And so they obtain a warrant to get his tire impressions from his truck. They're also, in this warrant, able to check his truck for any kind of blood or any physical evidence inside. They did not find a single drop of blood in his truck. They were also going to compare any dirt found in the tires of his truck to dirt found next to the body or where the tire tracks were. The results because they did find dirt in the tires, the results of that, which were conducted by the FBI, were determined that the dirt in the truck tires, Rick's truck tires, and the dirt found at the crime scene were not a match, was not the same dirt at all. And then you have very conflicting reports. Some people say that the tire impressions found at the crime scene were identical to Rick's tire impressions. But then you have other experts who state they are not the same tire impressions. Now, I guess a few hours after the murder had likely taken place, one of Lulu's daughters in the apartment that she lived in found blood in Lulu's bathroom. There was blood, I guess, some spatter on the walls, and there was also blood on a towel. But for whatever reason, Lulu's apartment was not searched until nearly a week after the body was found. Don't know why it took that long. The blood that was found was never actually analyzed by the police. However, later on, the attorney of Rick McHugh would have someone forensically analyze the blood spatter. It wasn't like a lot. It was like kind of just like a little bit of blood in the apartment and on the towel. And it was the same blood type, because this is, again, before extensive DNA testing was a thing. The blood type matched Lulu. So to them, that indicated that there was possibly an attack in Lulu's apartment. Furthermore, there was no blood or anything in Rick's truck, which means that a bloody fight did not take place in his vehicle. However, Rick was arrested about 6 months after the murder, and the prosecution claimed that the likely crime scene, the murder, probably happened in his truck, and then he dumped her body, despite having no physical evidence to suggest that any kind of altercation or murder or fight took place in his truck. Rick's roommate, Cheryl, would say there's just absolutely no way he could have done this, because the time it took him when he left the apartment to drop Lulu off, and by the time he came back, was like 15 minutes. There was just no way, because it's 4 minutes from their apartment to Lulu's, and obviously 4 minutes back. That's 8 minutes just of driving. The coroner basically would state that it could take upwards of 4, maybe even 5 minutes to strangle a person to death, not to mention she was beat. So there was another altercation that took place. And then he had to drive her to a dump site and take her body out of the truck and just dump it. That's not enough time to do all of that. It just isn't. But the prosecution said, no, there's time. Like, he would have had to do everything just like super fast. Like, drive, beat, and then, strangle her while he's driving, and then find a dump site. Like, it didn't make any sense. It was not logical. But the prosecution would present witnesses that stated they saw a truck similar to Rick's truck near the dumping site. But that sighting, according to the witness, happened at 2:30 a.m. That could not have been, because Cheryl said that Rick was still in the apartment at 2:30 a.m. with Lulu, and he had basically just left the apartment right around 2:30. The prosecution said that the wheelbase measurements of the tires found at the crime scene were a match to Rick's tires on his truck. The defense brought up witnesses who stated the opposite, that they were not consistent with, and these are experts, both sides are bringing in actual experts to say this. How you have two very conflicting reports on the same evidence, however, especially something that you can visually see, is bizarre. And so when this case eventually goes to the jury, later on they would find out that a jury member conducted his own experiment on wheelbase measurements, which you're not really supposed to do. And this jury member said, it's inconclusive. I don't think it was the same tires. And then the jury would later state that at this point, they are extremely confused by the tire measurement, evidence. Now, what about the blood in Lulu's apartment? Well, this is when they would bring Russell in. Remember Russell from earlier, her fiance's brother. He came in to testify that Lulu had cut herself shaving that night, and that's why there was blood in the bathroom and on a towel. But the coroner would later state, there was actually no cut marks on her legs, because he said he cut her legs shaving, or she cut her legs shaving. But there were no injuries to suggest that she had done that. There was indications from Russell's testimony that there's a possibility Russell was potentially involved in her murder, and because Russell was jealous that he wanted her, and he was jealous of his brother for, dating her. He was questioned by police initially about his whereabouts during all of this when the murder happened, and he gave, I guess, conflicting reports. He kind of said one thing, but then later said something totally different. A woman named Betty Grant, who I guess knew Russell, would go to police 4 months after the murder to state that Russell had been bragging or boasting about killing Lulu. that he said, quote, "Nobody has to worry about Lulu anymore because I took care of her," end quote. But according to the witness, Betty, the police did nothing about any of this. They didn't follow up. They didn't question him about it or anything. And another witness would come forward to suggest that Russell may have been involved. And it was Lulu's own 10-year-old daughter. And this was at Lulu's apartment. She testified that she heard and I think saw a man in the apartment on the morning that the murder would have taken place. This would have been after Rick had picked Lulu up, they went to the bar and all that. This would have been around the time when the night was winding down. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the daughter says she hears someone in the shower. And because her bedroom was right next to the bathroom, she hears the shower going. But what we would know later is that was not Lulu, because Lulu was already dead. So who was taking a shower? And then that's when she actually saw the man kind of walking by the bedroom door. On November 5th, 1991, Russell dies of ALS. And on his deathbed, his wife Diane asks him, "Is there anything you want to say before you pass on? Is there anything you want to get off your chest?" He says no. And to her, that means that, well, he couldn't have done the murder because he absolutely would have confessed to it. And I say not really. Maybe he didn't want his image to be tarnished after death. Maybe he didn't want people to think badly of him after he passed on. So he wanted to keep quiet about it to keep his status as a good citizen, I guess, around. So Rick McHugh, he goes on trial. The jury deliberates. They have they do their own testing, and they come back with a verdict of guilty, and they convict Rick McHugh of the murder of Lulu Courchesne, and he is sentenced to life in prison without parole. So about a year or so later, his defense team gets information that there was jury misconduct during his initial trial. Several jury members would go forward to state, yes, there was misconduct. And so the trial, or his case, is then, his conviction is reversed, and he is ordered to go through another trial. And that's what happens on July 19th, 1993, a second trial. The trial lasts for about 4 weeks, and on February 26th, he is now found not guilty of the murder of Lulu. They presented all of the evidence about the witness statements, how the timing would not have worked. The timing did not make sense. It would have been impossible for him to do this in that time frame. They had several people who could vouch for Rick. They also had witnesses who testified that this could have been Russell. Russell was no longer around to, try for murder, but they could at least paint him as another suspect. They also brought in new reports with regards to the tire tracks not being consistent. The mud found in the tires was not the same mud found at the crime scene. There was no DNA or fingerprint evidence that linked Rick McHugh to this murder whatsoever. There was no physical evidence at all. And the witness statements just made it even more clear that there is a very strong chance he could not have done this. And so he is found not guilty, and he is officially released from prison. And he cannot be retried for this murder. Well, Rick may not be guilty of the murder, but he is not exactly the greatest guy, because in September of 2000, Rick McHugh was accused of raping a handicapped woman. He had been hired to do repairs at her home, and that's when he attacked her. He also threatened to kill her and her family. And so she was so afraid that she didn't go forward to police for 6 months. And then in October of 2000, he is accused of stealing from a quadriplegic woman who he was helping build a handicap ramp for her home. She paid him her entire life savings to get this done. He basically took the money and did not complete the job at all. And so he was eventually charged with larceny for stealing money from her because he didn't do the work. He actually ended up getting a 5-year prison sentence for this. Then he is finally charged with the rape of the other woman back in 2000, but he is essentially cleared of the sexual assault charge, but he is convicted with assault and with threatening, with threats, and he is given an additional couple of years in prison. The latest information on Lulu's case happened back in, I think, around 2005. A couple of guys came forward to state that they think they know who killed Lulu, but they did not say the person's name, and they have declined to go forward any farther with police in fear for their own safety. These two people stated that they don't think Russell was the killer, and also Rick wasn't the killer. And so at this point, whoever killed Alene Courchesne got away with it because Rick McHugh was, for the most part, pretty much innocent of this crime. I mean, they had no evidence to put him there to say that he did it. It would have been impossible. Russell is no longer with us, so he can't be tried for her murder. And there's a possibility of a third-party individual being involved in this. That could have been a random stranger, a random encounter, maybe someone from, Lulu's apartment complex saw her stumbling and saw her drunk and did something about it. Lulu's daughter did say that the man she saw in the apartment that morning looked a lot like Russell, but that doesn't necessarily indicate he killed her. The fact of the matter is you have to be proven guilty first. And so you can only just think that maybe he had something to do with it. But legally speaking, no one can say who did it. No one knows who did this. I think it's pretty clear that Rick didn't do it. I think he's the only one in this who you can say for certain probably didn't do it. But who did? Because now the murder of Alene Lulu Courchesne is unsolved. It is now a cold case. It is cold as it has ever been. And so the police in Rochester, New Hampshire are asking the public if you have any information about the murder of Alene Lulu Courchesne to please come forward. Somebody somewhere out there knows the truth, and perhaps that someone is you. So please help her family, her daughters, her children, her family, all of them. Please help them get justice. You can reach out to the Rochester, New Hampshire Police Department. You can report your information anonymously. You don't have to say who you are. You just have to say what you know. So please help Alene Courchesne get the justice she rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case. True crime, a Rooney Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please subscribe, give this video a like so more people can see it, because you never know, the right person can see it that could help solve this case. You just never friggin' know. Recommend a case to my email address listed below. We sell merch in the link tree below. We ship all over the world. And that is it. That is it. Yeah, that's it for the video. So, yeah. Stop it. Okay. And like I always do to close out every video, I am going to eat something that is not meant to be eaten and give you my review of said product. So today, I'm eating a pair of Jeffrey Dahmer style, serial killer style from the 70s and 80s glasses. So let's see how they taste. Have you ever eaten rhinoceros shit before? I give a thumbs up. 1 thumbs up. 1.5 thumbs up, actually. Let's be generous. Try it.